Our first guest tonight is a singer-songwriter, drummer, producer, and director who's never backed down from a fight with a Foo. He interviews more than 24 rock stars about their early days on the road in his new documentary, What Drives Us. It premieres Friday exclusively on the Coda Collection on Amazon Prime Video. Please welcome Dave Grohl. Well, you really keep busy, don't you? A lot of guys will just kind of sit around. You're always up to something, whether it be barbecuing or making movies. You directed this movie.
I don't do well on vacations.
I guess not.
And honestly, the last year that we spent at home, not being on the road, I think I've probably been busier than I ever have in my entire life.
Yeah, it seems like you have. I mean, I know we don't know exactly what you're doing on day to day, but you have things coming out all the time, including this documentary that, first of all, I can't believe no one has ever done this before because it's such a great subject and you got so many great people and you put it together so beautifully. The idea, as I mentioned, is the early days when you're on the road with a bunch of guys trying to make it.
Yeah.
And you got, who's in this thing? Ringo Starr.
Ringo's in there.
Pretty good one.
The Edge from U2.
The Edge.
Flea from the Chili Peppers. Lars from Metallica. Steven Tyler from Aerosmith.
Yeah, Steven Tyler was very Steven Tyler-y in the documentary.
I mean, I interviewed him for about 2 hours and 20 minutes. Those 10 minutes of stuff I could actually understand were solid gold. But yeah, the advantage that I have when interviewing musicians is that we speak the same language.
Yeah.
I can
except for Steven.
Well,
Yeah.
except for Steven.
Yeah.
I mean, that's another planet. I don't know what that's. But we sit down and we talk to each other about shared experiences. And what I found in talking to all these musicians is that it all really does come from the same place. When you're a kid and you fall in love with rock and roll, you can't live without it. And then eventually you throw everything away, like you leave your life behind, jump in a stinky old van with your friends and just, go share it with the world with no guarantee that it will ever pay off.
And in fact, the odds are against it. Yes, some of the guys, I forget who was saying it, but the sentiment seemed to be like when I sat down with that band and I played, my first Peter Frampton song or whatever, and everybody got excited at school. That's when I knew. I think The Edge was talking about that.
Yes,
this is what I want to do.
First live performance, they played "Show Me the Way" by Peter Frampton, which explains everything to me.
I know, it's funny,
like,
right?
That was the springboard for them to become the biggest band in the world.
And for them to show us the way from then on, really.
Yes, absolutely.
Now, Steven Tyler, I think, is of the same mind as you in that he recognized the importance of the vehicle that they got around in. Now, this van that we just saw you drive in on, show that van here, will you? That van is the Foo Fighters van. But I have to ask you a couple of questions because the idea that you packed the guys and the equipment into this van seems contrary to the idea that you probably made millions of dollars with Nirvana before buying this van.
Yes.
And I would also think, like, if I was asked to be in your band, I would be like, oh, this is awesome. I don't have to travel in a van.
And then I kidnap you in a Dodge Ram van and take you around the world. Yeah, I mean, I think that when the Foo Fighters started as a band, it was important to us that it felt real. Because Pat and I had come from being in Nirvana, and William, our original drummer, and our bass player, Nate, they had come from another band, Sunny Day Real Estate. Both of our bands had ended prematurely, but we weren't finished making music, knowing that we could have done that, just kind of like jump on a private plane and fly around the world and play shows. We felt more comfortable doing it this way because that's the way we had always done it. And when you begin with something like an old van and your friends, it really it lays this foundation for everything that comes next. And it makes you appreciate all of the rewards that come after that. So, I mean, when we were touring in that van, or when I was 18 years old, the first time I went on tour was in a van like that with 6 people for months on end. we didn't get hotels. You know, we would like sleep in that van every night on top of our equipment. So if you found like someone who had a house that you could crash in, then you could actually sleep on a couch. You were like, oh my God, it's like the Four Seasons.
Yeah,
You're like,
right.
this is unbelievable, you know? You're not sleeping on top of an amplifier anymore. So, we knew this, like when we were starting the Foo Fighters, but it was important to me that it came from a real place so that we could appreciate it forever.
Do you think you will ever go through that process again?
Well, I'll tell you, one of the reasons why we made this film was because we were planning on doing a 25th anniversary tour where we would redo our first tour all over again. Not in the same corner bars that we played 25 years ago, now like hockey arenas and stuff like that. But we would actually pull into the arena in the van, jump out, rock for 3 hours, back the thing out, and split. Like that's what we wanted to. That's what we wanted to do.
What happened?
Well,
I have a feeling that the real underlying secret is you're just cheap.
that it might be that too. But our 26th anniversary is gonna kick so much ass, dude. It'll be amazing.
Do you use that van? Do you drive like your kids to school?
Well,
in
like
it?
when I do barbecue stuff.
Yeah.
If I'm going and doing like charity barbecues or cooking for hundreds of people, I fill that thing with all the gear and tow the smoker behind it. So, I mean, it's got 220,000 miles on it, but it's still, you know, except on the way over here, I was like going down the 101 on the highway, and the windshield wiper started going like, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm gonna take flight. Like, this is it. I'm gonna fly there. And they went, they were like, and stuck straight up. So when I first pulled up to the theater, I had these two windshield, and I was like, well, that's embarrassing.
Do your kids ever get in it?
Not that one.
Yeah, not that one.
I mean, that thing is like, it's like a rolling ball of tetanus, you know, like it's typhoid. Like, I do have another old van from the 60s that I drive the kids around.
That is tetanus free, yeah.
It's clean, dude. Clean.
What bands were you into in high school? Like, what kind of music were you into?
When I was a kid, you know, I fell in love with rock and roll like most other kids. I fell in love with the Beatles, and then I went on to Kiss, and I listened to Rush and stuff like that. And then, you know, by the time I was 13 or 14, I started listening to punk rock music. And I kind of put the classic rock records away and was just listening to crazy, dissonant punk rock stuff.
And by the time you were 16, you were in a band, a real band.
Yeah, well, by the time I was like 12, I was in a neighborhood band. By the time I was 15, I made my first record with a punk rock band. And by the time I was 17, I made my first LP. And so, yeah, I've been doing this since I was little.
Yeah, that's so crazy. And now we're going to talk about your daughter, and she's going to be performing with you right about that same age where you started making your first record. Dave Grohl is with us. His documentary is called What Drives Us. We'll be right back.
And that's just how you lived. This is just like, I guess this is my new reality, is I sit in a fart van and get to Baltimore and play for the bar staff. Like, it was awesome.
Did you know that the Beatles fart?
No.
If you fart, admit it. In the van, because it causes so much trouble.
Dave Grohl's documentary, What Drives Us. You know what? I have to tell you, I was watching that, and the idea that the Beatles fart, it might be the greatest question of the year. Did you know that the Beatles fart?
I don't think I asked him that question. I think he just offered up that nugget of wisdom to me. Just, no. I mean, I never imagined the Beatles. The only thing I imagined coming out of the Beatles is beautiful music.
But I bet their farts sounded very melodic, too.
Like a four-part harmony?
A four-part harmony, yeah, you know.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the next documentary. Which one of the Beatles do you think had the most gas? Any idea? Did Ringo let on?
Well, he was the drummer.
He was the drummer. That is how it goes. Where did you meet Ringo? How do you know him?
Well, the first time I met him was he was releasing a book called Photograph. He took a lot of pictures back in the day, and I met him then. And it's funny when you meet these people that are so like influential and instrumental in your life. that they become like a 3D figure. They're human beings.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you
And
forget that, right? Yeah.
You kind of forget it because
Yeah.
you've been looking at the album covers your whole life. And if you've ever had a chance to hang out with Ringo, he is the sweetest, funniest, nicest, most down-to-earth person you've ever met in your life. And he's a Beatle.
Yeah, well, yeah, most people won't get that chance. So this is as close as most of us will get.
Yes. And you know, and you don't often get to talk to him about his farts either.
No, rarely does he share that. He has to really love you, I would imagine, to tell you something like that.
I suppose. I mean, drummer to drummer.
Yeah, drummer to
We've all
drummer.
been there, Yeah.
So you're singing now with your daughter.
Yeah.
Okay. Whose idea was this?
So in the documentary, there's a band called X, which
Yeah.
are a legendary punk rock band from Los
L.A.,
Angeles.
local L.A. band.
Yes.
Yeah.
About 30 years ago, I got a letter from my grandmother that said, it just said, "Dear David, you might be related to this young man. Love, Grandma." And there was a newspaper clipping from the Youngstown, Ohio newspaper that said X were coming through town. And I'm like, my grandma's the least punk rock person in the world. Why would she care? But she had circled the name of the drummer, DJ Bonebrake, which is spelled Bonebrake. And I immediately realized, like, oh my God, that was my grandmother's maiden name. So the Bonebrake family.
What a maiden name
It's
that is.
how amazing! So the Bonebrake family, like you could trace it back to Switzerland in the 1600s.
So that wasn't a fake name.
It wasn't a punk rock name.
Oh.
Like everyone else had punk rock names. It was the best punk rock name for
right.
a drummer, but it was his actual name. I met him years later, and it turns out that the two of us are indeed related to each other through this crazy Bonebrake family tree. And so, which
How
goes
old
back.
were you when you got to meet him? Were you still a kid?
No, this is during the Foo Fighters, about 2007. He was friends with Pat Smear, our guitarist, because they
Yeah.
were both in the punk rock scene in the 70s. And so we invited him to the show, and I remember I brought my mother and sister. I remember when he walked in, we were like inspecting him to see, like, you know, he kind of looks like Grandma, you know, or whatever. And but so we found out that we were actually related to each other. So when we were finishing the movie, I thought, okay, well, I want to record a song to put in the movie. And I thought, oh, wait, this makes sense. X is in the movie. DJ Bonebrake is my long-lost cousin. This represents something more than just a song to roll in the credits. It has to do with lineage and family and inspiration. And I thought, who better to sing it than my daughter, Violet? So I said to Violet, I said, hey, I have this idea. I want to record this cool old punk rock song. She's like, okay, send it to me. And so I send it to her, and at 9 o'clock at night, she texts me. She's like, oh my God, this is awesome. Let's do it right now. So I ran up to my little home studio in my office, and I recorded the instrumental, did the bass drums and guitar and stuff in like 20 minutes, and then she came up and sang it. It's the first time she and I have recorded together, just the two of us. And I'm so proud of it because I love her very much, and she's an amazing singer. But it kind of follows this lineage and family history that you know, from this guy in Switzerland in the 1600s to now my daughter Violet. It's this Bonebrake family tree that means a lot to me.
That is really interesting and crazy. And also, I've heard the song, and you're right, your daughter does have a beautiful voice. You think
great.
she's going to load up a van with her friends and travel around the country?
You know what? I hope that she does.
Will you give her that van?
What's that?
Will you give her the red van?
It'll probably be a Tesla.
Oh, you also did a project with your mom.
I did.
Which is another interesting angle that you've taken, which is talking to, and you guys wrote a book about this too, right?
Yeah, my mother wrote a book about mothers of musicians.
Mothers of musicians.
Yes, it's called From the Cradle to the Stage. And she interviewed Dr. Dre's mom, and Pharrell's mom, and Brandy Carlisle's mom, and Miranda Lambert's mom, and Michael Stipe's mom, and all these. And what she found in these interviews was that there are really strong parallels in all of these relationships between the parent and the artist. At some point, these musicians decide, like, oh, this is who I am and this is what I'm going to do. And then it's the parent's job to show love and facilitate whatever they can do to you know, help their kids follow their passion. And we turned it into a documentary series, which is really beautiful because you get to know so much more about the artist, but more than that, you realize that the real rock stars are these parents that had to deal with little hoodlums like us.
Yeah, like, you know, when you give a kid a drum set, that means he's a troublemaker.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right?
but then when that kid buys their mom a house, it's all you.
It's
all
a beautiful circle.
Yes.
So that is called, what is the name of that documentary? That is called From Cradle to Stage.
That's right.
Very good name. That premieres May 6th on Paramount Plus, and What Drives Us premieres Friday on the Coda Collection on Amazon Prime Video. And Dave, we'll go pick your daughter up from soccer practice or wherever she is right now. And later on, we're going to hear music from Violet Grohl, Dave Grohl,
That's
and
right.
some very important
Chris
friends.
Novoselic from Nirvana is playing bass, and Dave Lombardo, who's the former drummer of Slayer, who's also in the movie, is playing the drums. And Greg Kurstin, the world-renowned producer. It's a super group.
It's a super
It's
group.
a super duper.
It's a family super group.
That's right.
Dave Grohl, everybody. We'll be back with Billy Porter. Hi, I'm Jimmy Kimmel, and this is The Internet. I made it myself. Hit subscribe if you like it.